Alright, let's talk about some of the other components you're going to need in order to start reloading ammunition. So, obviously, you're going to need a way to measure your powder. This is a relatively inexpensive digital powder measure. It's not going to be super accurate, but it'll get down to 1/10 of a grain, which is around where you want to be. For precision, you're going to want to be able to get down to 1/100th of a grain. This is from Frankfurt Arsenal. This will cost you $25-$30. Very easy to get. You can get them on Amazon. I think I ordered this one from Amazon actually when I got it. Very small, very compact, repeatable. Make sure you get a decent set of check weights. It comes with a 50-gram check weight, but you're going to want like a set of 5 different check weights, which will probably cost you another $30-$40 to make sure that every time you get it, it's calibrated properly before you start reloading. Next, you're going to want some kind of primer correlator tray. You put your primers in here, you shake them up a bit, that gets them all facing the right direction. You put it back in here, you flip it, then you peck it with this. Most primer systems come with either a primer tube or a primer collator or both that you can use to pick up your primers. These are insignificantly expensive, $3-4 for one of these. Depending on what type and what brand you get of these, they could be anywhere between $7 and $30. You can get bigger ones that hold more than 100 primers, but typically they hold about 100 primers. You can get automated primer corroborators like the Frankfurt Arsenal Vibra primer and stuff. That's about $50. It's like a little gun. You put the primers in it. It has a little tray kind of like this, and it vibrates itself. It's really unnecessary. You can even get big correlators for the big machines that you just pour entire boxes of primers into, and it automatically feeds the primers for you. A lot of times those have jamming issues and stuff. Only a couple of them work well, and the ones that work well are hundreds of dollars. Best bet, especially if you're going to be reloading less than a couple thousand rounds an hour, just pack the primers with your primer picker-upper, just like everyone else does. Next, we got a basic case cleaner. If you're going to be reloading low volume, you can get like a Lyman case cleaner. It comes with a bunch of little tool heads, which I don't have the tool heads in here at the moment. But it comes with all the little heads you need to clean your case, cut your case and all that good stuff after you've trimmed it and everything. It's not expensive. I think I paid like $30 for this. And I don't use it that often anymore because now I have this thing over here. This is for when you start to get into higher volume reloading. This is a Frankfurt Arsenal Case Processing Center. Hornady and everything carries similar ones that have more or less stations. I think Lyman has one with like 5 stations. They're all anywhere between $80 to $150. I think you can get some more expensive ones for like $200. Basically, you just need something that's going to be able to trim your cartridges, your cases, if you're going to be reloading a rifle, or just be able to clean and chamfer. There's not a whole lot of breast processing that comes into reloading pistol ammo, which we'll go over later. With rifles, you have to process every single case before you load it, and we'll get into that more detail later. You can get a table cutting station. It's manual. Costs about $100 to trim cases. You might, if you're going to go that route, you might as well get one of these ones, unless you're going to go precision. Again, this is for volume, not precision. Lube. When we're talking about prepping cases, you need case lube. You can get away without lube sometimes with pistol cartridge cases because they're straight wall, as long as you're using a Carbide Die, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for rifle cartridges, you always need to use lube, even if you're using a Carbide Die. So there's a couple different types of lube you can get. You can get something like this, which you can see how dirty this is because I use it all the time. This is for my precision loads. I use a much thicker lube because I size them differently than I do my mass production ones. And it's not a carbide die, it's a steel die. For my mass production ammo, I use regular spray lube. You put a bunch of it in a bucket, you spray this on it a few times, you shake it up, it lubes up pretty decently. This thinner stuff you can use as long as you're using carbide dies, because carbide's a little bit slicker, and it works pretty well. I haven't really had that many issues. I think I'll get maybe one stuck case every 4,000 or 5,000 rounds. It's not too bad. Stuck cases are a pain. We'll talk about those later. This goes with the lube pad. So, when we're on the topic of case prepping and case cleaning, you're going to want some kind of case cleaner for when you pick up the brass from the range. So, this is a vibratory tumbler. You put the brass in it, a couple hours with a little bit of polish, which is what we got here, and it comes out clean enough for the most part. Pistols, I don't really worry too much about it. Some people wet tumble. You can also get a wet tumbler. It's a little bit more expensive. Stuff comes out cleaner and more consistent. I haven't found a huge advantage from wet tumbling over dry tumbling, so I just stick with the dry tumbler because it's cheaper. If you get a dry tumbler, you're going to need a media separator, which we have one over there, but we'll talk about later. I'll put it up in a picture and everything with the post. Ultrasonic Cleaner. This is what you use if you don't have a wet tumbler and you want to get the gunk out of your rifle cartridges. So sometimes you're picking up cartridges at the range, you're picking them up out of the mud and everything, the mud cakes on before you get to clean them. This is what gets all the oils, mud, grease, all the nastiness up off of your cases before you put them into the other tumbler. So you don't need it. Technically you can just get away with the other thing, especially if you're only reloading pistol. So Vibratory Tumbler you can probably pick up for 50, 60 bucks for a good one, maybe 20, 30 bucks for a cheap one. Ultrasonic Cleaner you can pick up for between $80 and $200 depending on how big and how fancy you want it. You need calipers. Doesn't matter if you have digital or regular calipers. I use digital calipers just because it's easier to read, and why not? Unless you're doing precision reloading, you don't need them super, super accurate. But you do need something that's going to measure case lengths and make sure everything's within spec. And we're going to talk about specs when we actually talk about reloading and stuff. So, you need to make sure you got some calipers. Bullet pullers. This is for when things go wrong. You will make mistakes as a beginning reloader. I have had to use this very one. I've had the same one for 7 years. I have had to use this inertia puller probably 3,000 or 4,000 times in the past 7 years. Sometimes you just got a bad batch of ammo because you did something wrong, or you forgot about something, or you're an idiot like me and you overseat some of your bullets and you're like, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. You need something to reverse that and get your components back. So you need a bullet puller of some sort. There's kinds that go on the wall for those of you that want to whack with the hammer. There's different inertia pullers from different companies. I've always heard that RCBS is one of the better ones. Horn & D makes them, Lyman makes them, everyone makes them, but this one's 20 bucks. So I don't know how much they are nowadays, obviously, but I'm sure they're still around that range somewhere. Can't go without that. Saved my butt plenty of times and saved me a lot of money. Case gauge. Caliber specific case gauges. This one is for 9mm. This one's tiny. So, case gauges comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. I also have a bulk case gauge that I have put up in a couple videos in the past. Basically, this case gauge is supposed to be cut to the SAMI specifications of your chamber. And in layman's terms, what that means is as long as it fits in here, then it should fit in your gun. If it doesn't fit in here, it probably won't fit in your gun. It might. It'll be sticky. You'll have feeding and extraction issues. This is what you use to make sure everything comes out right. Every single cartridge that I load goes through a case gauge of some sort, whether it's one of these or one of my bulk case gauges. Everything goes through it because if it doesn't, you don't want bad things to happen. Since we're talking about checking things, for when things really go wrong, case extractor kit. This is a kit that you can get from a lot of different companies. They make different types. I like the RCBS one. I think this one costs about 30 bucks. What this does is if you get your case stuck in a die, which will happen eventually and sometimes happens, this allows you to extract that case from that die without damaging the die. So it's a must-have. Things will go wrong and things do go wrong, which is why we have countermeasures for it. This is one of your countermeasures. It's not going to come in any kind of beginner kit, but I highly recommend it. I would say it's a must-have, as well as the bullet puller. going on to the book. Never start reloading without a book. Don't go by internet data. Don't go by nothing. If you're a beginner reloader, go buy the book. It'll tell you everything you need to know from start to finish about reloading. I can't express enough the safety things that it goes over and the instructions that it gives you, the specifications for each cartridge. You can get 20 different reloading manuals and it would never be enough. They all have slightly different data. Some of them say relatively the same stuff, but the more data you have, the better. You can't have too much information. So they'll go over the base specifications for each cartridge, which we'll go over how to do that and how to read that at a later time. And gotta have one. You can get them anywhere from $15 to $80, depending on the size and the volume and which manufacturer it's from. And last but not least on this table is your dies, which are one of the most important parts of reloading. So these are pistol dies. This one's specifically for 9mm, and it's in a Lyman case, but Lee case I mean, and it's a bunch of Dillon dies, but we'll get over that in a minute. So basically, if you're reloading straight-walled cartridges, such as pistol cartridges, you're going to have 4 dies for the most part. We're going to have. So we're going to talk a little bit about dies. So for straight-walled cartridges, you're going to have 4 basic types of dies. You're going to have a sizing die, which is going to resize your case and deprime or decap your cartridge. So it's going to pop out that old primer, and it's going to resize that case to the specifications that it needs to be. This one here is a Dillon Carbide die. So you can get these in steel or carbide. If you get them in carbide, it's a little bit better because it's a little slicker and it helps extract and feed that case into a little bit better. You don't need to have the carbide necessarily, but I would recommend it. If you do not have a carbide, you must lube your cases, even if they're the straight-walled cartridges. For rifles, you still need to lube it whether or not using a carbide die or a steel die. Afterwards, for straight-walled cartridges, you're going to have the expander die. And this expander die, what that's going to do is it's going to put a bell on the case so that you can get that bullet into that case properly, and it'll open up that case mouth a little bit for you to be able to put that powder and everything into there. And most of the time, these are straight through so that you can apply powder or your charge at the same time that you expand that case mouth. After that, you have your seating die. This one's really old and busted up because it's one of my older ones. But, so this is what seats the bullet itself into the case. These, you can get ones that are adjustable at the top. This one is not. This is just a old mass production one. So basically you just screw in the die to how deep you want it and you just keep it there. But a lot of the micrometer sizing dies or seating dies and such, they're going to have adjustment knob up here that you can adjust how deep or how not deep you want your bullet to go into your case, which for the most part is loader preference. But remember, if you're just starting reloading, you're going to want to go based off of the book specifications and only do what the book is telling you to do. And then the last die that you're going to be using in the process of reloading straight-walled cartridges is your crimp die. For all semi-auto pistols and straight-walled cartridges, you're going to need to crimp it, or else you're going to have that issue of, as the round chambers, that bullet's going to seat into your rifling, and then if you try to extract it without firing it, the bullet's going to stay behind, and you're just going to pull out an empty case, and you're going to have gunpowder spill all into your gun. That's not a good day. It's quite a mess. Your crimp, you need to remember to adjust your crimp properly. Too much crimp, and you're going to be having pressure issues. Too little crimp, and you're going to be leaving your bullet behind in the chamber again. Crimp is something that you play with a little bit, and we'll talk about that when we get to the crimping step. Some crimp dies have an adjustment knob on top as well. This one doesn't. Again, these are just for mass production. These aren't by any means precision or competition loading dies. These are just spitting out as many rounds as you possibly can as fast as you can kind of dies. When we're talking about rifles, you don't have 4 dies for rifles typically. Normally you only have 2, sometimes 3. If you're loading semi-autos, you can still crimp your semi-auto rifles, but I normally don't crimp either of my rifles, whether it be the bolt guns or the semi-autos. So you're going to have a sizing die. And you can either have a full length sizing die for a rifle, which means it's going to resize the entire thing, which is what you need to do if you're going to be loading semi-autos, or you're going to have a neck sizing bushing die or a neck sizing die, which only resizes the neck of the cartridge, which increases your life of the case if you're going to be reloading it multiple times, and increases your neck tension accuracy. So if you're precision reloading, there's going to be a couple more dies that you might be using, and maybe some mandrels and stuff to properly neck tension your cases, but for the most part, if you're just making blasting ammo or target ammo, you're just going to be running it through a full-length sizing die and calling it a day. It still has the same decapping mechanism on the inside and stuff, but it also will have an expander on this little thing, and the expander, what that does is that after it resizes the case and makes that neck really narrow, it'll expand that case neck back out so that you can properly put a bolt in there and everything and seat it properly. Then the second one for rifles is just going to be the seating die. No frills or anything there. It's the same, works the same way as the pistol one. It just seats that bullet right into that case so that you have a bullet seating into it. Dies range wildly in price. A Lee factory die set will cost you maybe $30-40. You can get one Redding die for $300. It all depends on the precision that you want in your dies, how accurate you want to be able to load in your rounds, whether or not you're going to have them carbide, if you're going to be using small base dies, which is what you want to use in semi-autos, if you're going to be using die to load semi-auto weapons such as ARs and pattern rifles and stuff. For the most part though, for a beginning reloader, I would recommend a inexpensive set of beginner dies such as the total kit. If you get this kit that I got, which is not these dies, but it's the Lee factory dies, then it comes with a tiny little instruction manual and step-by-step on how to use each one of these dies, teach you how to get them set up and everything, and you can use it as a reference as well when you're actually setting up to make sure that you're doing everything right and getting everything done the way it needs to be.